Good evening, welcome to NovaraLIVE. Coming up tonight, Keir Starmer could face an inquiry into whether he deliberately misled Parliament over the appointment of one Peter Mandelson. Plus, we speak to Mayor of Hamlets, Lutfur Rahman, about running what is a left-wing local authority. Welsh campaigner Elbashir Idris takes us through his recent run-in with Reform UK's Arron. And the government takes another desperate swing at Palestine action. I'm Arron Bastani, and tonight I'm very happy to be joined by James Butler. James, how are we?
I'm very well, and it's a pleasure to be back on home turf.
Yeah, we're rolling back the years. This is like the Rolling Stones.
Some sort of tired reunion tour, unable to retire.
Yeah, past it geriatrics, still thinking they've got it.
We do qualify as geriatric millennials?
We do, right?
Oh, God.
Just about. If you'd like to support our work here at Novara Media, you can, of course, sign up at novaramedia.com/support. Help us build a new media for different politics. My goodness, we're going to need it after May the 7th. And, of course, you can listen to the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts too. And finally, don't forget to let us know what you think on tonight's show in the comments. Super chats are welcome, of course. But if you really want to give us your cash, like I say, go to novaramedia.com/support. MPs have been debating whether Prime Minister Keir Starmer should face an inquiry into whether he deliberately misled Parliament over Peter Mandelson's appointment as the ambassador to the United States. The motion has been brought by a coalition of opposition parties, and it calls the House of Commons Privileges Committee to lead the investigation. This is quite a big deal and could be very damaging for Starmer if it passes. After all, it was the Privileges Committee that looked into Boris Johnson and the Partygate scandal during COVID, finding that the former PM had misled the Commons, not once, but several times. It's not a great association, is it, to be compared to Bozza? The motion is being spearheaded by Tory leader Keir Starmer, but it's also being supported by her Lib Dem counterpart Ed Davey, as well as the SNP, the DUP, and independent MPs. Now, senior Labour figures have called the motion a political stunt. This was Keir Starmer speaking to Cathy Newman, who's just moved to Sky News, on Tuesday night.
What my political opponents are doing tomorrow is a political stunt.
Yeah, and it's a stunt that you pulled on the last Prime Minister,
didn't you? It's a political stunt. And the reason they're doing it is that they don't agree with what we're doing as a government.
Yeah, but it's a stunt that you pulled,
changes,
though, Prime Minister, isn't it? On Boris Johnson, you tabled the motion to refer him to the very same committee. If you're so confident that your conduct is so very different to Boris Johnson, why not just let the Privileges Committee investigate and you know you'll be proven right? Why are you whipping your MPs to vote against this call for an investigation?
Well, because it's a stunt. And
you are whipping your MPs against it.
Well, we've got a meeting of the PLP later on tonight where that's usually determined on a Monday evening. But it is a stunt.
It's a stunt. They don't agree with what we're doing. No, they don't agree with you appointing the best friend of the world's most famous paedophile as this country's ambassador to Washington. That's the point. Keir Starmer addressed that claim in Parliament today.
The evidence which we've heard from the Foreign Affairs Select Committee this morning is only making this matter worse for the Prime Minister. So it is very wrong for them to be talking about a stunt. This is about the integrity of this House. Why is the Privileges Committee only a political stunt when Labour is in the dock? Do they still believe that honesty and accountability matter when it is one of their own? Do they believe that Labour Prime Ministers should be held to the exact same standards that they held Conservative Prime Ministers to? Or do they believe that there should be an honesty discount because the Prime Minister is Labour? The fact that there are so few cabinet ministers sitting on the front bench, they've had to dig deep to the bottom of the barrel for junior ministers to come and sit there, I think shows that they're struggling to get support for this.
Now, Labour has been heavily whipping MPs to vote the motion down. This was from the Times political editor, Stephen Swinford, this morning. Confirmed Sir Keir Starmer will impose a 3-in-line whip on Labour MPs, as we first reported at the weekend. Number 10 confident it has seen off a major rebellion and that it should be able to kill the motion without too much bloodshed. It has thrown the entire government and party machine at securing the PM's survival. How about governing the country? We have thrown the entire government at protecting this lame duck again. Badenoch addressed that threat to MPs in the Commons.
I know it is very difficult for Labour MPs to walk through the lobby with other parties. But let me be clear, what they are saying if they vote against this motion. Would they rather be on the side of Peter Mandelson, of convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, of Morgan McSweeney and Matthew Doyle, on the side of the man who sacked Sir Chris Wormald, sacked Sir Ollie Robbins, Sue Gray. Is that what they came to Parliament for?
Good question, isn't it? Some Labour MPs did break ranks, important to say. This was Emma Lewell.
Peter Mandelson should never have been appointed. This was a fundamental failure of judgment. Matthew Doyle should never have been given a peerage. This was also a failure of judgment. I feel the way that today's vote has been handled by the government smacks once again of being out of touch and disconnected from the public mood. The fact that MPs like me are being whipped into voting against this motion is, in my view, wrong, Mr. Speaker. It has played into the terrible narrative that there is something to hide, and good, decent colleagues will be accused of being complicit in a cover-up. A number of weeks ago, at a private meeting with my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, I spoke about how, after a career of working so closely with victims of child sexual abuse, that I could not even begin to express how much it hurts me when people are screaming at me in the street that I am a member of the Pedo Protectors Party.
And Nadia Whittome also declared that she would vote against her party.
It is vital that we, as MPs, no matter our political allegiance, do not allow the impression that we are in any way attempting to cover things up for the leadership of our parties. And that is why I'm extremely disappointed that Labour MPs are being whipped to oppose this motion. Votes on House business are not normally whipped, and even Boris Johnson's government did not whip Conservative MPs.
Ahead of elections next week, those rebelling Labour MPs have, it seems, caught the mood of the country. Polling by YouGov shows that 61% of those polled think there should be an inquiry into whether Starmer misled Parliament, with just 20% against. Broken down by party, 49% of Labour voters, a plurality, think there should be an inquiry, pretty much half of them, with just a third in the other direction. But cabinet ministers are also doing what they can to secure Labour votes ahead of the national elections in Wales and Scotland next week, and local elections in England too. On Wednesday morning, Chancellor Rachel Reeves suggested she'd consider a one-year rent freeze to protect renters ahead of an expected cost of living crunch over the Iran war. That's a very green-coded policy, with Green MP and former Green Party leader Carla Denyer saying this in response. I've spent over a decade making the case for rent controls as an essential part of making housing truly affordable, alongside funding councils properly to build and buy more council homes and scrapping Thatcher's right to buy council home sell-off scheme. I can't help but notice that after years of Labour ministers telling me their party does not support rent controls, and after rejecting my attempts since 2024 to amend the Renters' Rights Act to include rent control powers, the Chancellor is choosing now, the week before the local elections, to, quote, consider the idea. Could it be that they've been out door knocking and discovered that our policies to protect renters are cutting through to a public fed up with Labour's failures? Bit of common sense there from an MP. It's quite unusual, isn't it, James?
Well, I mean, common sense were an act of desperation. And I think there's a common factor here, and you heard it in Keir Starmer's attempted answer to that question by Cathy Newman, is that they've seen that the polling, they've seen the electoral battlegrounds coming up and have thought, okay, well, maybe a sharp left turn here is going to shore up our support and we'll bill our government as sort of social democratic or soft left. You've seen a bit of that over the past week as well, with the sort of few Keir Starmer mouthpieces left in the media saying, well, actually, the government's achievement, if you look at it in reality, it's really soft left and things like this. What this is the classic thing that happens to Labour governments around local elections, is that they tend to react to those areas that are up for election. So if you remember last year, they reacted very strongly to the Reform successes in those elections by saying, oh, well, okay, well, we really need to get harsh on migration. We'll put Shabana Mahmood up to say some unpleasant things, and we'll get Keir to give an unpleasant speech about migration as well. So this lack of principles at the centre for the Labour government leads them to move which way the wind blows, or try to shore up advantage that way. I think it's implausible. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think they even believe it's going to work either. But the more serious thing there for me is that this stuff, this movement to the process issue, so the question of whether this is a thing that's going to happen in Parliament, whether you're going to get this inquiry, whether the legal minutiae mean that he did or didn't mislead Parliament, whether he misled Parliament, it was intentional or otherwise, this stuff is a distraction. It is a distraction from the lack of seriousness and the lack of rudder in government, the lack of a sense about what it needs to do for the country. It's what makes the sally about rent controls implausible. It's what makes the excuse that, oh, they're coming for me because my government is doing so many brilliant things implausible. And when they this outgoing former press chief, Matthew Doyle, elevating him to the Lords as if it were something that is something that Labour staffers get by right. There is a fundamental lack of seriousness at the heart of government. And the Mandelson appointment is just a function of that. And the more they can talk about process, the better for them, because they have no answer to that.
I think that's such a great point. So they don't have to talk about the politics. They don't have to talk about a vision. They can just talk about goodness knows what. I'm not a big process person when it comes to the House of Parliament. Some people are, of course. You're watching the wrong channel, frankly, if you want to get into that.
Well, I can spend hours talking about that.
You can, but you're much more interested on the hard politics, which is what we like to talk about here. There was, sticking with this for a moment, there was that quote that was published by Robert Peston on X, attributed to Keir Starmer, making him sound like Clement Attlee. This is all coming out because we're bringing things into public ownership, we're taxing the rich, we're building houses. Some of that's true, of course. They're bringing, for instance, rail into public ownership, and there's been tax on non-doms, etc. That wasn't there before. But this is not the reality of the government. And quickly, you're saying that they're incoherent. Where do you think that's coming from? Because on the one hand, we have things like local government reorganisation, where you're hearing about efficiencies and putting local authorities together to save money. And then you see things like Pride in Place, where they're actually creating new parallel authorities to spend money. You hear, we want to put residents first, but you're creating new metro mayors. It doesn't seem to have an overarching plan. There doesn't even seem to be an overarching theory of change, actually, which at least Blair had, right? Yeah. Blair was give tax breaks to the aspirational middle class, help big business, help finance, lean into globalization, and you know what? There'll be crumbs that can go to the very poorest. That was something. I don't see that sort of mental map with Starmerism.
No, there isn't one, and I think that's important. Starmerism and the people around Keir Starmer recognise that there are problems with the country, right? They're not blind. They're capable of seeing the country that they live in. It does seem to me that they are unwilling to take the difficult decisions to confront some of the really serious interests, that are standing in the way of really substantive change. Whether that's because they want a quiet life, whether because they're unwilling to spend the political capital. I don't want to speculate too much about that, and it's a complex story. Part of this also is a process question. Part of this is to do with the enormous number of stakeholders there are in any decision, the number of organizations which have as their rationale, a part of that is keeping the organization functioning. So there's lots of kind of bureaucratic problems. People make fun of...
You say bureaucratic by virtue of the Labour Party and Labour movement, or the British state?
So it's both. The Labour Party, one of the things that's a real head scratcher when you look at the structure of the Labour Party, you have people with all these sort of executive jobs that are siloed and they don't talk to each other. So the party is a bit of a mess itself. But really the problem is with the state and with the state structure. It's very difficult to get things done in Britain. They're not wrong that planning reform needs to happen. I don't think it's going to unlock enormous productivity change, but getting anything done in this country is very, very, very difficult. Whether they have the willingness to face down some of the challenges involved, whether they have, part of this is the problem that they're driven by the desire to react to these kind of relatively short-term problems and don't have a strong sense of what they need to do in government. Now, if you ask people in Downing Street why that is, they'll say, it's the fault of Sue Gray. Sue Gray was tasked with coming up for our plan when we come into government. It turns out that there was no plan. Well, I don't think it's on blaming a functionary for what should be a political decision. Keir Starmer's responsibility was to come into government with a clear plan and a clear sense of, like, the officials work to the principal, right? And if the principal doesn't say, I need a plan, I need to see the plan, I need to be responsible for the plan, then the plan's not going to happen.
Yeah. As we saw, though, with Keir Starmer as he was talking to Cathy Newman now at Sky News, he seems to think that the rules always apply to other people, It's not a stunt when I do it, only when it's Kemi Badenoch. It's a pattern of behaviour we've seen now consistently, really, since 2016. The vote in Parliament over whether Keir Starmer may have misled the House is taking place after a much-anticipated evidence session before the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. This morning, Morgan McSweeney, former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Keir Starmer, gave his evidence as part of the ongoing investigation into how Peter Mandelson was appointed as this country's ambassador to Washington, despite his well-known links to paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein. A large part of the questioning turned on process and whether there was pressure on the Foreign Office to approve that appointment, despite Mandelson failing his security vetting. A chair of the committee, Emily Thornberry, set the scene.
Essentially, what you've done is you've briefed the press, you've told the King, you've told the incoming president, he started being paid, he's got his pass, all of these sort of things have happened, and then you do the due diligence. So at that point, due diligence had said, no, sorry, really, too risky, can't do this, and he'd... Imagine the storm.
Sorry, no, due diligence had been done. DV.
Sorry. DV. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
If it would have been very embarrassing for us, but can I just play an alternative kind of scenario? So at the time, it didn't jump out to me as a problem. We appointed, as I said, I got appointed before I completed all my necessary work. Jonathan Powell got appointed too before the necessary work. If Mandelson's DV had been a problem, it would have been an embarrassment for us. It would have been a much bigger problem for him. But there's an alternative scenario, which is that we had, say, we're going to do DV before we talk to the palace or before we talk to the US administration. The chances in government of there being a leak anyway would have been a problem. Either way, if your lead candidate fails DV, it is embarrassing, but it's far preferable to pull that candidate at that point than to go any further. If that happens to your candidate and your candidate blows up and you have to pull them out, that's what happens. It's embarrassing to us. It would have been worse for him. But at the time, nobody said to me, hang on, before you announce anything at all, make sure that we do this DV first. Of course, if somebody had, I wouldn't have questioned it.
But Dame Emily, I wasn't buying it.
But at the time, the agenda was that he is offered the job on the 20th and he's supposed to be in Washington on the 20th of January. So that's just a month. And during that month, there's Christmas and there's New Year. I mean, all I'm suggesting is that this was part of a deliberate strategy to push this as fast as it could be in order to ensure that people could not raise any objections in the circumstances, because there simply wasn't time.
No, I don't agree with that at all. If there was problems with his DV, would have pulled them. If we'd been told that he couldn't get the necessary security clearance, I've no doubt the Prime Minister would have pulled them. I mean, in the event, the Foreign Office couldn't complete the work until after the inauguration, but the timetable was being set by the US political calendar. We wanted to wait until after the US presidential election to work out who the candidate should be, and we did want the candidate in place by the inauguration. But it wasn't a big deal that he wasn't in place by the inauguration. He was in place, I think it was about 2-3 weeks later.
What do you make of Morgan McSweeney? He's one of these people, and we get them all the time. It's a leitmotif of British politics, isn't it? The power behind the throne. You had Mandelson, Alistair Campbell, Dominic Cummings. He's another one of those. But he does seem almost uniquely absent. Like there's not really much there, whereas Campbell, Mandelson, Cummings, they kind of had a hinterland. They seem quite interesting people. What do you make of this particular shadow master?
Well, I mean, I think he's an interesting character in the sense that there's a lot of mythology about him. Not all of it stands up to scrutiny quite as clearly as one might hope. So the big story is like, he drove the loony left out of Lambeth. Not true. The left was in retreat in Lambeth long before McSweeney was on the scene. Those battles had been fought and lost by Ted Knight and co. So lots of this reputation is a little bit ginned up. There's no doubt that his electoral strategy in the last general election worked. It does mean that Labour now has a huge number of MPs on very, very thin majorities, and that are probably looking for new jobs. So whether it's a sustainable strategy, who knows? But the ascriptions of political genius to these figures, so figures like Cummings, figures like Campbell, they tend to be inflated, and they tend to depend on decisions which are, arguably have a large component that are luck, large component that are conjunctural. So it might be true that Morgan McSweeney read the moment right in the last election. I think that probably is partly true. I also think the electorate was sick of the Conservatives. I think they would have voted for pretty much anyone. I think he understood how to lie to the Labour members. And that's what he is. And that's what he's really good at, is taking the temperature internally in the party and fighting within the party. In politics as a whole, I'm not sure he's so much of a genius as he's made out to be.
I think that's such an astute observation. Actually, if you look at the theory of change under Starmer in the last 2 years, it is always the same solution to different problems. And the solution is attack the left.
Yeah, punch a hippie.
Punch a hippie. Well, the problem is actually you need the hippies right now. I said this last week at the top of the show. My wife's a Labour councillor, and she's canvassing. She's not standing for election this year. And I say to her, I'm really struggling. We have a great local Labour councillor. They're great. It's a good local Labour group. But Keir Starmer hates me. Keir Starmer and his entire operation, not me personally, but he hates people like me. They hate the left. What do you want me to do? I have a modicum of self-respect. I'm not gonna vote for people who hate me. And there's millions of people like that.
And you no longer have nowhere else to go.
Right? You can't just say to millions of voters, you're all, dossers, go away, don't come back, close the door behind you. His literal words, and then expect them to vote for you. Very strange. An accusation that has been levelled at McSweeney is that he was Mandelson's protege, and so had a personal interest in bagging him the top diplomatic job. Thornbury pushed that point.
So do you think that when the chance came for you to give Peter Mandelson his last job, you stopped thinking about what was best for the government? Really, you stopped thinking about what was best for the country. And you just thought, I want to give this job, this great job, to one of my heroes. And it became an obsession. And it may be that the Prime Minister can be criticised for giving you this leeway, but it was a leeway that you abused. And you stopped thinking strategically. You closed your eyes to the risks. You didn't consult the necessary people, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary. You railroaded this through as fast as you could before anyone could realise what had hit them.
I don't think that's true. I certainly spoke to the Foreign Secretary a number of times. Then Foreign Secretary. I have a very good relationship with the Deputy Prime Minister. I've known him for very, very many years. And I would certainly have spoken to him extensively at the time. I don't regard Mandelson as a hero. I think that's an exaggeration of the kind of relationship that I had with him. In every advice that I gave to the Prime Minister, hand on heart, I thought I was operating with a motive in a national interest. In politics, you over decades, you know a lot of people. I've had to, in 20 years in politics, I've had to fire friends from jobs. I've had to turn people down who were desperate for jobs, who were closer friends of mine than Mandelson's, who really wanted jobs in Number 10, or people who thought they were going to be ministers, because I've always tried to operate in national interest. The amount of times I've had friends come and see me or phone me who were really angry at me because they didn't get the job that they wanted to get. That's what politics is. You have to try and always operate in a national interest. Of course, you know people, and then you make judgments that in this case turned out to be wrong and incorrectly. I completely accept that, but it was this was not some hero I was trying to get a job for. I thought that his skills as an EU Commissioner would help us to get the trade deal that I think the country needed, because we were very, very exposed after Brexit, and getting that trade deal right was very important. I thought he had the skills to do it. I made the wrong judgment. I completely accept that. But my motive was always in the national interest.
Over decades, I sought to serve the national interest. You're not Bismarck, right? You're not Talleyrand. You've only been in government since 2024. What, when you were Labour Together organiser, I'm serving the national interest. No, you're serving the interests of a faction within the Labour Party. Or in Lambeth or Croydon, I'm serving the national interest. Sounds rather strange. And also, he's being quite open about a culture of nepotism in the Labour Party. Over the years, many people are saying I should have a job. Is that how it works? It shouldn't. Obviously, it is how it works, by the way. The contention is that's how it worked here with Peter Mandelson too. McSweeney was fairly good at defending the claim that the process had been properly followed. But like the rest of the country, a number of committee members couldn't believe common sense, which isn't that common when it comes to the political class, hadn't played a bigger role. This was member John Whittingdale.
He had twice had to resign from the cabinet, that he had business interests with China, that he had a close friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, and also that he was friends with Oleg Deripaska, who was a confidant of Vladimir Putin. Despite all those things, you still thought he was the right person for the job?
Well, to take each one of those in turn, he after his last resignation, he had rebuilt a reasonable reputation for himself. He had gone as an EU commissioner, and as far as I was aware at the time of his appointment, and I don't know what will subsequently come of their own investigations, but he had a good reputation. He was seen to have done a good job as EU commissioner. Then he came back into British politics and served as a very senior member of Gordon Brown's premiership, Gordon Brown's government, and again at the time was well regarded as a senior minister in that department. So he had done these two big political jobs long after his last resignation. It's why I think that a lot of the media and a lot of other politicians at the time thought that this was the right appointment for the country. The nature of the relationship that I understood he had with Epstein was not a close friendship. How I understood it at the time was a passing acquaintance that he regretted having and that he apologised for. What has emerged since then was way, way, way worse than I had expected at the time. And it was when I saw the pictures, when I saw the Bloomberg questions in September 2025, I have to say it was like a knife through my soul.
Literally the only person in the country, apart from Peter Mandelson, who thinks that Peter Mandelson had done nothing wrong, seemingly. Pictures of Mandelson and Epstein were in wide circulation before 2025. Other members found the appointment implausible too.
There were lots that were known about Peter Mandelson before this appointment, and I appreciate that you have said that you made judgment call that you've since said is wrong. But there's a very well publicised friendship with one of the world's most notorious sex offenders. How was it that nobody within Number 10 had seen this as an issue that so many of us had an aversion to? What was going on there that this was not the immediate red flag?
So I think the thinking was that the time that he was in contact with Epstein, he presented as being an acquaintanceship. He regretted maintaining contact after his first conviction when he realised whatever he realised. I mean, according to his story at the time, he wasn't defending what this guy did in his first conviction, and he was saying that he was duped into understanding the nature of what had happened. So we
He got convicted though. He couldn't get around that. I mean, he had been convicted, of sex trafficking a minor. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, how do you talk your way out of that? Once a friend has been convicted of that, surely they're no longer a friend, let alone staying in their flat.
Yeah, and I don't have anyone in my life like that, but he didn't.
He did, and you promoted him as being the next ambassador to the United States.
He didn't say that he was a friend. He denied that he was a friend. He tried to say he was a passing acquaintance, that he was somebody who didn't really know enough about to ask questions.
And the due diligence said otherwise.
The due diligence didn't say he was a friend, and Mandelson
stayed in his house. The due diligence said he stayed in his house.
This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. He stayed at his house, but they were just passing acquaintances. There's two ways of looking at this. Either Morgan McSweeney thinks we're stupid, or his position is, look, I'm just really stupid. He resigned after all, right? Maybe that's the excuse. I'm stupid, I resigned. Please forgive me. The Prime Minister may have had reservations too. One piece of new information was that following a due diligence exercise on Mandelson in Downing Street, McSweeney was asked by Starmer to send 3 follow-up questions about his relationship with Epstein. The committee wanted to know why.
Did you put those questions in writing?
Yeah.
Is your evidence that you put those questions in writing because you thought Mandelson was more obligated to tell the truth if he had to write it down?
Yeah, and I had a record as well.
So does that mean that you advised the Prime Minister that you didn't think that Mandelson had told you the full truth about Epstein?
No, I didn't say that to him.
What did you say? Or you say that the Prime Minister thought, well, if there's a serious problem, the DV will pick it up?
No, I didn't say there's a serious problem. The DV will pick it up. No.
No, but I mean, either you thought that Mandelson was lying to you about Epstein, and presumably you told the Prime Minister that, or you thought, well, or the Prime Minister thought, well, okay, he's lied, but let's make sure, but the DV will pick it up, so that'll cover us at that point.
No, I thought he had told the truth. I thought if he had written to me and set it out the way he did, that he'd have told the truth. That was a mistake.
Why would anybody presume that Peter Mandelson is telling the truth? Be sceptical to some extent. By the way, when you're in government, there are so many issues, there are so many problems. Very few of them are of your own making. You have to be on top of them. Economic crisis, energy crisis, geopolitics. A backbencher has done something unsavory. Somebody has tweeted something. Why would you create more? A reminder, there was no vacancy for the ambassador to the United States. They decided to put this guy in. It wasn't like, well, we have to appoint somebody. No, this was a choice. It was also revealed that another candidate was up for this very important appointment.
We procured 2 strong candidates for him. One was Mandelson, and the other was George Osborne, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, who I'd met as part of it. And my view was that we had, and I said to the Prime Minister, you have two appointable candidates. Others agreed that there was two appointable candidates. I can't recall anyone saying that Mandelson was not appointable.
So he's saying there's 2 appointable candidates. By the way, there was no vacancy, and one of them is George Osborne. We know what you think about Mandelson. What's your views on George Osborne being the ambassador to Washington?
I think my views on George Osborne are not repeatable on air. But to put it politely, I think he has gotten away with being responsible for many of the severe problems that this country faces. And he swans around television studios and he swans in and out of various lucrative jobs and gives his opinions on his little podcast with, who is it, with Ed Balls?
That's right.
As if he didn't hold enormous responsibility for the miserable lives that many people in the country that he governed have to live. I think it's outrageous. And I think it is outrageous that a Labour government would consider giving him the plum diplomatic job. This is a man who does not have enormous diplomatic experience. He was Chancellor of the Exchequer, but certainly not a diplomatic role. He does not have extensive background, and more importantly, it should be, you would hope, politically repugnant to a Labour administration. And they certainly don't owe him anything. I mean, it could be argued, of course, that one of the things going on with Mandelson is that, the new Labour government is repaying a debt that it understood it had, because Mandelson had been in the wings and whatever. Certainly not conceivable in the case of George Osborne. It's just fundamentally nauseating. And it's politically cretinous as well. I mean, can you imagine that if they had to eat the headlines, if Keir Starmer appoints George Osborne? I mean, you worry about people in this country thinking, oh, there's a uniparty. Oh, they're all in it together. Oh, they all go to each other's weddings. They're all in each other's pockets. And then you appoint a man who wrecked the country as your ambassador to Trump. I mean, what's going on here?
I was speaking to Adrian Waldridge recently. Now, his credentials as a centrist dad are, you're not going to beat them. He lives somewhere in Hampshire, near me, but I don't live in a posh bit of Hampshire. I live in Pompey. He lives in Hampshire. He worked at The Economist for 3 decades. He's now a columnist at Bloomberg, right? And he's saying George Osborne is the worst person in British politics because I'm somebody who views myself as pragmatic and moderate and a centrist, but not in this kind of centrism. He actually gives a pretty good accounting of the failures of centrism. He said, this man poisoned that politics. He made us all look ridiculous and stupid. He gutted the public realm with no plan. He's a fool, He's a complete fool. He's inept. This is a guy who's a columnist at Bloomberg. And you have a Labour government saying, no. We're going to make him this country's ambassador to its most important ally. No. And you spoke about his credentials as Chancellor and how terribly he did. Let's not forget the follow-up, the sequel. He was the editor that oversaw the demise, ultimately, of the Evening Standard newspaper. This guy has done nothing correct in his public life, and you're only elevating him. It makes no sense. And like you say, at any point in the last 40 years of politics, it would be strange. But people would be saying, well, they're parking the tanks on the Tories' lawn, and all that. But Reform are leading in the polls. Why are they not responsive to this changed political context? Because like you say, I can literally see GB News and Talk TV and The Sun and The Mail and Farage. I can just see all of it. They all say, this is the uni party, this is the elite. As Reform is saying in these local elections, vote Reform, get Starmer out, let's get the uni party out. Why can't, I'm not going to say Labour because some people in Labour can see it. Why can't Keir Starmer and the coterie around him understand this is a problem for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's really puzzling because from outside the bunker, and my understanding is there really is a bit of a bunker mentality in Number 10 these days, which is not surprising because most of the country really despises the government and what they're doing and despise Keir Starmer in particular. And indeed, many of his MPs who run happily to various lobby correspondents to tell them that they also share the country's opinion. So it's not a surprise that there's a bunker mentality. I'm sure I would have a bunker mentality as well. But it is puzzling. There is obviously within Starmer and within Starmerism a sort of deep respect for institutions, which brings with it a kind of political inertia. I am moved to think of Dominic Grieve's remarks, and I think these were reported in Oliver Eagleton's book on Keir Starmer, when Keir Starmer was DPP in charge of the CPS. Dominic Grieve said something like, I couldn't have wished for a better collaborator in basically administering cuts to the CPS. Incidentally, those cuts are partly responsible for the enormous backlog in the courts and tribunal services, which is one of the things that is currently undermining, belief in a competent, functional state, in which people say, well, I was robbed, and I'm never going to see the person who robbed me brought to trial. There's a 5-year wait for this or that, and so these things have long-term consequences. They're consequences. But look, I mean, it's that identification with the administrative state. I think Keir Starmer and people who ascribe to Keir Starmer's politics, which are not very many people, nonetheless believe that there is a sort of strong anti-populist vote out there, right? That if it comes down to it, and you remember that this was a Morgan McSweeney belief when he was still inside, that if it comes down to a choice between Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage at the next election, if it comes down to a choice between populism, so-called, and a competent administrative state, that it will be Labour, it will be the competent administrative state that will win that fight. I am not at all convinced by that, and I don't think there's much evidence for it.
No. They seem to confuse men in their 50s and 60s who wear gilets and live in the home counties in Oxfordshire as the country. They are voters. They do matter. They tend to edit newspapers in this country, but they're not the electorate. We have some great comments here. Waluigi Mangione, if you're going to eat shit, it's best not to nibble. I like that. It's true, right? You know, we want a bit of drama. Morgan, if you're going to do your mea culpas, give us some drama. Go, I really screwed up, guys. But he's saying, no, he's kind of resigned, but then he's not saying he's really screwed up. He does seem on the verge of tears at points in that. Good. You were involved in a process where an awful person was going to represent this country as its ambassador to Washington. At Nick the Peasant, £5. And of course, MPs have just voted to not make Keir face an inquiry about all this. Predictable, but still, F this shower of useless bastards. Your words, Nick the Peasant, not mine. Inevitable, of course, the Labour government does have a very, very large majority, but it does really help that line of attack, doesn't it, James? You have something to hide. Of course, you have nothing to hide. What's the problem?
Yeah.
And it's pretty terrible timing, we're less than 2 weeks out from local elections.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I were running against a Labour candidate in this election, I would run on the national story. I would run on, this is, dodgy behaviour at a national level reflected, and there is, frankly, often very good reason to think it is reflected on a local level, particularly in those Labour fiefdoms, particularly where they have become entitled in terms of their local government. So, I think it's not. These elections are going to be hard for Labour anyway, and not just in a sort of everyone votes against incumbents in local elections during a parliamentary term. No, these are going to be really, really bad elections for Labour. Going into it looking like you've engineered some sort of dodgy cover-up by leaning on your own MPs in Parliament, probably not something you want to give to your opponents.
We've got a lovely comment here. I'll read it quickly. You won't see it flash up. At Philip Goff Philosophy. More James Butler! Why isn't he on much? He's a busy man. We'll get him on more if you want to come on more, James.
I'm always happy to be here.
James is a Novara Media OG. We started the thing together. He's now moved on to better edited pastures. Can I say that? At the London Review of Books. I don't know. No criticism of our editors. I'm quite happy to say all the editors at the London Review of Books are smarter than I am. Much more thoughtful pastures than here in Novara Media. They're not as good at YouTube videos, though. And that's what matters in 2026. We have 2,617 of you watching. Great for a Tuesday night. Stick around because the show's probably going to go on a little bit longer than usual. As I say, when we do these longer shows, we've done, 45 minutes on this really important story tonight, I think in a way that nobody else does in the media, frankly. It really does make a difference if you say, you know what, I'm going to support these guys. So if you already support us with £2 or £3 a month, why not give us a few more quid? Change that direct debit. Or if you're not a supporter, maybe consider it just £1 a month. I'd give the RSPB £10 a month just to protect those birds and piss off those Tory developers. I do the same with the National Trust because it winds up reform. Maybe do the same with us here at Novara Media. Support our work, help us build a new media for a different politics. Our next story tonight. Lutfur Rahman is the mayor for Tower Hamlets and leader of the Aspire party. He's standing for re-election in May, with Aspire having all of their seats up for grabs in all-out elections at the same time. Earlier today, I spoke to Mayor Rahman about his record in recent years and what's next if he is indeed re-elected early next month. Lutfur Rahman, welcome back to the Novara Media studio.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be back with you 4 years down the line. How time just flies so quickly. Thank you for inviting us.
It has flown by. We did have you on 4 years ago. You were standing to be elected as the mayor of Tower Hamlets for a third time.
Yeah.
After an incredible history. If people want to know more about that, they're welcome to watch that interview. You're standing again for election in May. Sure. You lead a party called Aspire. They're standing candidates for the council in Tower Hamlets at the same time. Of course, London has all outs on May 7th. Tell me a little bit about the last 4 years, just generally. We'll talk about policy in a minute, what you've delivered. What's it been like? Because you had a very tough time, it's fair to say, before that.
Well, it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure, absolute honor to serve the people of this borough. And for us, what we promise We will make sure we deliver. That's what people want to know. If you can't deliver, you haven't delivered, be honest with the people. And I've done that. That's what we've done. So it's been great. It's been exhilarating. We've had some challenging moments. There's always challenging moments in life and especially in politics. But on the whole, I believe it's been fulfilling.
So recently, before we talk about your record over the last 4 years, which I have to say is impressive.
Thank you.
And I think people would struggle to say otherwise, whether or not they agree with you. Speaking to the Times newspaper over the weekend, Wes Streeting, Labour Party minister, obviously, government minister, described Tower Hamlets as a, quote, rotten borough. What do you think he meant by that?
It's sad, it's disappointing. We are a borough of 340,000 people. We do every year, we do resident survey. We did a resident survey just last summer, autumn. 90% of the people of our borough say they get on with each other. Where, like any other constituency in the country, where our people are very proud of where they live, where they work, where they do business. And what delivered over the last 4 years, it's been outstanding, as you have said. Some other boroughs in the country haven't even thought about it. We have delivered it. So it's sad, it's disappointing what Mr. Streeting has said. What I will say to him, come and visit us, please. Come to our town hall. We can take you around the borough, talk to people, and you will see we are a fantastic borough, we're a high-performing borough, and people of this borough get on with each other, and they are proud to live, work, and visit our borough. Look, we've got the Canary Wharf in our borough. We've got the Tower of London in our borough. We've got the City Fringe in our borough. We have the Columbia Road in our borough, the Whitechapel Market in our borough. We've got fantastic markets, about 6 markets in the borough. We've got business districts in the borough. We've got one of the youngest borough population anywhere in the country. And we've invested so much money, some £250 million during the 6 years of our, I will say, financial tenure, additional money to improve the lives of our residents. People of the borough get on. They're happy with what we have done. Please, before anyone makes a statement, if you don't live in the borough, come and visit us, talk to us, and come and talk to the people of the borough.
So is that an invitation to Wes Streeting?
Invitation to Wes and to others who have any preconceived views about us, come and talk to us. Come and see who we are. We are a leading, high-performing local authority in the country.
Yeah, Wes Streeting. The invitation's there. It's not far, is it, from where he is? It's very nearby.
15, 20 minutes drive.
But I want to just probe this question. Yeah. What do you think he meant? I mean, rotten borough is, of course, a term from before the Great Reform Act 1832, before the Democratic era. I presume he hasn't said something else because he doesn't want to libel you. He doesn't want to say something specific because it might be inaccurate. He's using really a very ambiguous term. When he uses that word, rotten borough, what do you think he's referring to? Because it's not clear to me.
I mean, I can't get into his mind. However, Wes Streeting does have a strong opposition in his part of the world. He only won by a slender majority at the last general election. I believe in this local election, there are opposition, there are independent parties. So, he and his Labour group have a challenge in that part of the world. But to refer to us, to talk about us or any other borough, I think is unsavory. I think it's very judgmental. We are a borough, very outstanding. We have, our children's services received outstanding last year. This year, beginning of the year, we received good for adult social care. We're investing so much money into our services. What I say to Mr. Streeting, come and talk to us. Come and listen to us. If you have any issue, any views about us, you are minister, you are in the cabinet. Come and talk to us. We will air them out. We can clarify some of the issues that you may have with us. But to put us in that category as a local authority, I think it's very unfair. It's unjust. Listen, we're doing well when it comes to finances. We put money back in reserves. Yet we're investing money in frontline services. We're protecting our frontline services. We're protecting our frontline workers. We are a truly progressive socialist party. We have been fighting the cost of living crisis over the last 4 years. We were the ones, when the government took out, the winter fuel allowance, and I'm glad they reintroduced it because of the backlash. We were the ones stepped in Hamlets and brought in a winter fuel allowance, gave money, supported our pensioners. Some 4,000 pensioners were supported. So we're the ones who have delivered progressive policies where other Labour councils or other councils in the country have cut them. We're not the one who have gone out in a begging bowl to the government to help us financially. We've got what we're entitled to in accordance with the formula. So what I say to Mr. Streeting, once again, I don't know what your motive is to bring in us into your internal debates in your borough, but please, before you make a comment of that kind on any other borough, any other local authority, just think about what they will feel. Think about the pain it inflicts on them, especially when they are a high-performing council. So once again, come and talk to us. Let's take you out, walk you around. Let's go to Kenilworth. Let's go to Brick Lane. Go and look at the curry industry in Brick Lane and Bangla Let's take you to Columbia Road, Roman Road, Whitechapel Road, and meet the real people of the borough and see what true judgment you will have of us.
Get some nice grilled meat at Tyab's. One of the best places to eat in London.
And Brick Lane, Bangla.
Yeah. So you're talking about high performance. Let's talk about your record in the last 4 years.
Sure.
Because it is really impressive. You've delivered affordable homes by the thousand, 6,441 delivered or in delivery by this month. Beginning to invest over 600 million to improve the quality of existing council properties. So on housing, that's pretty special. But then there are other places where actually even that sort of pales into, not insignificance, but you're very much a national leader. So on things like universal free school meals for all primary and secondary schools, you're the first council to do that. You re-established EMA, Educational Maintenance Allowance, that was scrapped, of course, by the Lib Dems and Tories in 2010. You've got university bursaries. You did winter fuel payments, you just mentioned that, which of course was cut by Labour. The first council in the country to provide universal school uniform grants for low-income families. You've opened 20 new youth centres across the borough, including the first youth centre dedicated to girls. You've brought in a house with leisure centres. They're no longer being run by private firms. You've introduced free swimming for families, for all women aged 16 plus, men aged 35 plus. That's a really long list of things. Sure. And you know what? There are lots of Labour councillors out there, Labour MPs, even some like West Streeting, might agree in theory with many of those policies. How are you in Tower Hamlets able to afford to do that? What's the secret sauce?
Well, first of all, we have to be on the side of the people of the borough. They are the residents, the 340,000 people who live in the borough. We have to extend our policy to support each and every one of them. Obviously, resources is not infinite, it's limited. So you've got to reprovision, you've got to be careful how you spend your money. But what I want to say, thank you for going through the list. Some of those policies are country first. So obviously the free school meals, both primary and secondary school, the only borough in the country, the free school uniform grant, only borough in the country. The investment, the £13.7 million additional money into our youth services, a youth centre in every ward. So we want our kids not only to do well in education, go to the best universities in the country, do well and have good life chances, but we want to make sure that there are adequate after-school weekend provisions where they can have some social activities, talk to their peers, or do their homework, whatever it is. So, and we've created more jobs, 75 additional youth workers, where I would say where we are a leading council in the country when it comes to tackling and head on the austerity, the cost of living crisis, but putting money into people's pocket. If a family has 3 children going to primary and secondary school, they will benefit per year to the tune of £1,650. That's money going back into the pocket. We've got to help people who are on low income, especially when it comes to free school meals, universal. Every single parent gets that support. Where do we get that money from? You know, we are a council, we are, of every single penny, we are realistic, we are constructive. We have been using our money constructively, we have been using our money prudently, you know, and of course, we are a borough with one of the highest child poverty in the country. We are very diverse, our profile is very diverse. So when it comes to grants, government grants, we get our fair share of government grants. It's not a gift from government, it's according to need, according to your profile of your population, we get that money. And we are also a local authority where we have one of the highest volume of planning applications in the country. A small borough, but we get so many developers who want to build in our borough. From buildings, from development, we get our share of Section 106s, we get our share of homes, and we get our share of what's called SIL money, i.e. money to do infrastructure projects, money to spend on various activities. So we're fortunate as a local authority when it comes to developers. What we do is this: we use our money wisely, we re-provision services and spend money where it's most needed. And some of the policies that we have delivered over the last 4 years, we believe, and that's why I promised in my manifesto in 2022. So if we come to power, this is what we're going to deliver. And believe me, we delivered. And not only did we use that money, some £250 million additional money we invested in the community on top of the statutory services, but we've also put money back in reserve. So we have a healthy reserve and we've invested in community and frontline services.
And you've got quite low council tax, just to be clear.
We are the 6th lowest council tax in the country. And let me tell you what we've done on that. So my pledge was that we will freeze council tax for the poorest in our community. Yeah. And for us, the officers advised us that it can't be an infinite pot, it has to be a limited pot, that those who are earning, the household income is less than £50,350, for them, we won't increase the council tax. They can put in an application, the council tax will be frozen. For those who are on benefits, very low income, they don't pay any council tax at all. Yeah. So in the first year, we froze it for everyone because we are in the height of the cost of living crisis. And in the second, third, fourth year, we went back to our manifesto and said, look, it's only going to be for those on low income. Below that threshold, we froze it for them. We want to support and help people who are on the poverty trap. Their income isn't that high to lead a comfortable life, nor is their income so low to get benefits. We want to help them too.
The squeeze middle.
Absolutely, the squeeze middle.
Well, that was Mayor Lutfur Rahman. He is, of course, the Mayor of Tower Hamlets, speaking to me earlier today. We'll be putting out a longer version of the interview tomorrow. Like I say, he's standing for office for re-election in May. There are all-outs as well for councils across London. Every single local authority in London is up for grabs, including Tower Hamlets. Now, James, some of the comments while that was playing were saying, why are you speaking to this guy? He's corrupt. I have my views on that. I've talked about it many times. The man has been massively mischaracterised and I think mistreated by the British state. His record, though, in office really does speak for itself. It just does. Mm-hmm. You know, bringing back EMA, bursaries for kids that want to go to university from low-income families, free swimming for young girls, families, women over, I think, 35 and girls up to 16, women under 35, rather. So many things, 12,000 council homes in one borough. Now, this is really important to say, Tower Hamlets is quite unique because, of course, you have Canary Wharf, you have lots of business rates, you have lots of SIL funding. Not every local authority in the country can replicate what they're doing. Lots of money going to low-income families, and that's really directly coming from global finance, right? JP Morgan, etc. But other authorities in London can do something similar, but they don't. You know, Hounslow has Heathrow. We don't hear about how Heathrow is funding all sorts of goodies for people that live in Hounslow. And I find it really interesting that of all the politicians in this country who are framed as corrupt, it's somebody like Lutfur Rahman. And as he told me, I think elsewhere in that interview, 5 years of VAT weren't filed under the previous Labour administration. I can promise you, if that was Lutfur Rahman doing that, we would have heard about it. And I feel like, tell me if I'm wrong, James, when it comes to independence, when it comes to the Green Party, even the SNP, it does feel like different rules apply than when it's the Tories or the Labour Party. There is a great deal of actual corruption in this country when it comes to Labour and the Tories, particularly in those areas where they're a one-party state, but we rarely hear about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really important. And, I recall through some fog the details of the original case, which as I think the sort of spiritual influence stuff is completely ludicrous and utterly utter mischaracterization, and were there some irregularities? I mean, I think that certainly is the case. I don't think it is necessarily any more the case with any other party that uses somewhat dodgy sort of influence networks and sort of communal networks of influence. That happens quite a lot in various Labour fiefdoms as well. I think it's certainly used to redound to the benefit of the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets. So let's not think that this is in any way a sort of unique case. And you're quite right, of course, that attention ends up being paid to people like Lutfur Rahman, much more than it does to the arguably much more extensive operation of influence within the Labour Party. I think one of the most astonishing things actually about Rahman's tenure, this kind of second tenure as mayor, is you look at it and think, well, but hang on, what were the Labour Party doing? What were they doing in local government here? If he's able to do all this stuff, if he's able to fund all this sort of EMA replacement, if he's able to, do all this kind of social housing building,
winter fuel allowance,
is it not the case that the Labour government, Labour local government in Tower Hamlets told us all of these things were impossible, that they couldn't possibly do all these things, that in fact they needed to be completely in hock to property developers and they couldn't possibly redirect business rates in this way? So, I mean, to me, that's the big question, actually. I don't care about much of the other stuff. I take it for read that there'll always be some shenanigans in local government. I've been too close to it not to think that. For me, it flags up that in all of these sort of local Labour Party mini oligarchies, there are a bunch of politicians doing what they're told and not thinking about what's in the best interests of the local community. That is a problem, and that is going to come and bite them. One other thing that is really important is that the Tower Hamlets model is not replicable everywhere, right? And that, not everywhere has Canary Wharf in their backyard. Not everywhere is overspill for the city. And that leads to a really important question about national politics. Right? Lutfur Rahman probably doesn't want to be MP for his area because on a national level, he'd actually have much less influence. And there's a real issue, there is one version of the sort of Jeremy Corbyn ideal party, the vision for your party, RIP, I think we can say probably pretty safely.
I think they got 1% with you guys today.
Okay, well, 1% is not nothing. In the margin of error for nothing, I suppose. A loose federation of community independence or sort of localized parties like this has really major questions to answer about what it thinks it should do on a national level. Because there will be people in areas that are don't have the cash flowing in like Tower Hamlets does, has perhaps an older population, is faced with really significant social care costs, and it will not be able to do the same things. That means politics has to be conducted at a national level as well as the local level.
I entirely agree, but I'd also add, mayors can do a lot.
Mayors can do a lot.
And the thing is, we have all these Labour and Tory mayors, mostly Labour mayors, who just make excuses for not doing anything. And Andy Burnham, of course, is the exception. Mayors can do a heck of a lot. So if you have a Metro mayor and they don't do very much, I'm thinking Dan Norris before he returned to the House of Parliament for the West of England, he didn't do anything. Get somebody else, get another person in. They can do a lot. That's what Lutfur Rahman's story tells me. And I agree, of course, the extent of it is really contingent on the wealth in that part of the world. The case, by the way, relating to Lutfur Rahman, extraordinary. We covered it in great detail at the time. It was a private case, so unusual. Some of the offences, spiritual influence, date back to basically anti-Catholic legislation.
They're worried about Catholics. Yeah.
19th century anti-Catholic legislation, quite incredible. And again, some of the incentives that people were getting to vote would be things like being offered, sweets or a kebab on the street. That does happen in lots of places. I'm not excusing it. I would like very rigorous, Republican-style democratic law, or people being offered lifts to voting booths. It happens. We saw actually something similar with the Greens after Gorton and Denton. Straight after it, the polls shut. We have this private organisation saying that there was family influence. The Muslim patrician father patriarch was saying to the women, vote for this. Never a problem when Labour were winning the seat, but the minute that a Green gets in with a majority of 4,500, suddenly, Sky News breaking. There's something there, isn't there?
Well, I mean, that story I think is especially interesting because, it seems to me that you volunteer as one of these sort of democracy volunteers. I think they're good people. I don't think they're there for a sinister intention. They're a real organisation, but I think if you read back in their reports, they do tend to see a lot of influence. They worry about the outcome of an election. I think there's a confirmation bias there, right? Like you've gone out to try and detect it. I think it's very hard to know. Let's imagine that you're standing there trying to scrutinize what people are having a chat about as they walk into the polling place. They're maybe not speaking in English. Well, then you start to think, well, what are they saying to each other? I think these, there's a degree of sort of paranoia that was in operation here. It's worth saying, of course, that returning officers are also trained to look for signs of influence. In voting booths like that. They're trained to look and intervene. Yes. This is an explicit part of their training. So, I'm pretty skeptical. And I think I'm pretty skeptical partly because I really don't think that there's much, they're voting for a rather nice woman plumber who has kind of very clear non-sectarian positions on this stuff. It's kind of a ludicrous. To me, the accusation is that they're voting, on their beliefs. They believe in a variety of things, and they've decided the Green candidate matches that. Well, that's just voting.
Yeah,
that's what
just
voting
voting. It's a bit like with Zach Polanski, isn't it? All the anti-Semites are joining the party led by the Jewish guy. Can't you see it? No, I can't actually. You're crazy. Yesterday, Plaid Cymru posted this video on X.
My name is Bashir, and I'm a community organiser from Butte Town in Cardiff, and there's something really important that I need to tell you today. The Senedd elections on May the 7th is the most important election we've ever had in Wales. And polls show this is a straight-up fight between Plaid Cymru or Reform. This is a choice between hope or division, substance or noise, ambition or chaos, responsible leadership under Plaid Cymru or Donald Trump-style politics with Reform. We can't risk Wales's future being in the hands of a Reform government. It just doesn't make sense. They will privatise their NHS, work for their billionaire mates, and raise council taxes, just like what they're doing in England. Don't stay at home on May the 7th thinking everything is going to be okay. Plaid Cymru is the only party in Wales that can stop Reform. So on the 7th of May, vote Plaid Cymru. Together, we can stand up for Wales.
One party polling first criticises another party that's polling second. So far, so normal. That was until Arron Banks, prominent Brexit donor and friend to Nigel Farage, posted this. Welsh lad. The implication there being that the person in that video, whose name is Elbashir Idris, can't be Welsh because he's black. Banks later appeared to say that was a joke, posting this in response to Will Hayward on X. Plaid supporters like you have no sense of humour. I thought that Wales was only for the Welsh. You've said it often enough. For the record, Will Hayward hasn't said that, and he also isn't a Plaid supporter. Presumably, Mr. Banks isn't interested in finding such trivial details out before actually splurting nonsense in public. Earlier today, in any case, I spoke to the gentleman at the heart of that original video, Elbashir Idris. I began by asking him about his national identity.
When it comes down to nationality, I'm sure if it comes down to a piece of paper, it will say British. But in terms of identity, I would certainly say Welsh more than British in that sense. I've been here in Wales for nearly over 3 decades now. And during that time, during my time here in Wales, in Cardiff, I'd certainly describe myself as a Cardiffian, as a Welshman. But I also have my very strong heritage roots with Sudan. But there is space to let that all flourish here in Wales. And I think that's what we're here to discuss today.
Why do you feel Welsh but not British? Before we get into the substance of what Arron Banks is saying, whether or not it's racist, was it a joke? That's what he claims. If you're being charitable to some people in Reform, they'd say, well, no, you're British, you're not Welsh. How do you feel about that whole conversation?
But I think it's down to the values that you see between Britain and Wales. First, I would even go down to the national anthem. The British national anthem is God Save the Monarch, whereas the Welsh national anthem literally talks about the love that they have for their land and how it's been passed on by their forefathers and those before them, and how they've treated this land with equality and growth and prosperity. Now, what would you rather be? Would you rather be a citizen of a nation that keeps on giving praises to a monarch that just keeps on taking everybody's taxpayers' money, or be part of a nation that wants and is proud of their land and wants to improve and believes in a better future for themselves?
Yeah, I have to say, Wales is very lucky. You know, it has not just one, but two great anthems on these islands, Land of Our Fathers, but also Yama Ohid. Quickly back to Banks then. I presume he thinks that you can't be Welsh if you're black. I mean, there's a long history of black Welsh people. Ashley Williams captained the Welsh national football team not long ago. Robert Earnshaw, Ryan Giggs, of course, half black, Shirley Bassey. I mean, presumably he's aware of some of that. Or do you think that somebody like Arron Banks has literally no idea about the multi-ethnic history of Wales?
Well, I don't expect a candidate of Reform, or even if he is a former candidate or a party member of Reform, quite frankly, to have the ability to be so nuanced in the identities of other people. They have a very us versus them mentality, whilst I believe the rest of the world really does mesh well together in this globalized world. And we've been going through this now, right, of racism. What does it mean to be black and British, I guess, or black and Welsh? Listen, I pay my taxes here just as everybody else. I get out and do my community organizing, doing the things that I know is for the benefit of the people here in Cardiff. He can say to me that you can't be black and Welsh. Well, hold on. Back in 2019, it was me and a bunch of friends that helped make Cardiff a living wage city in the UK, meaning all the employers within Cardiff, essentially, people getting a living wage so they can get through have some dignity. We also the same ones that have a community jobs compact that allowed people from diverse backgrounds to be having the same equal footing as everybody else when it comes to getting a job, having a name, address, and CV blinds. We were also the very same ones that, funny enough, I ran 20 kilometers in a chicken costume when I was 17, just to show how far Muslims within our area have to travel just to eat halal Nando's. And eventually Nando's heard our pleas. And then they opened up a halal Nando's in Cardiff within the inner city so everybody can enjoy it, not just Muslims. And so what I'm trying to say here is that there is much contribution, not just from myself, but from a wider range of ethnic people in Wales.
I want to drill down on this. So we know what Arron Banks thinks. We know what high-profile Englishmen think, right? I want to know, do you think that is in any way reflected in Wales? So, you canvass in Wales, you've organised for a living wage in Cardiff. Do you think that Arron Banks is capturing a certain section of public opinion, albeit a minority one in Wales? Or is this just some hectoring Englishman from across Offa's Dyke who doesn't know what he's talking about and actually has made a fool of himself? I really want to know this. Do you think a part of Welsh civil society agrees with what he said?
Well, listen, for me, it's not about party politics. I grew up here. I've worked in communities here. I've seen what public services and education and safety and solidarity can do when you give it to a child, a family, a refugee, a working class household. And for me, Wales gave me that foundation. And for me, it is whether I want to protect that foundation for the next generation or allow it to be poisoned by division. Now, when it comes to Reform, let me tell you everything that they are not. and that everybody else in Wales is. They are ambitious, they are serious, they are compassionate, they are confident within themselves, and they're not waiting for Westminster to decide on what's allowed to happen or what's going to come forward from there.
Did what Banks say upset you? When you saw that, did you go, "Oh, you weren't hurt"?
No, if anything, I laughed. And I read through the comments, and I've seen what's going on there. And more so, I'm more elated over the responses, the positive responses and support. And I'm sure you've seen it as well from many people. And seeing that and the outpour of messages, I wasn't hurt. But I'm certainly elated to know that I share a nation, share a Cymru, with everybody here in Wales. So people with different races, backgrounds, creeds, whatever. At this point, we've all got thick skin. This isn't my first rodeo with racism. But I was certainly touched to see the responses of solidarity from everyone. And that's what it means to be Cymru, to be Cymru, to be a Welshman, a countryman, a fellow countryman. And that is, we're all in this together. And I guess that's a message, that's a belief that reform will never be able to taste the power of unity.
And then last question, really. People will have seen you for the first time with this this obnoxious tweet from Banks, and of course the video that preceded it with Plaid Cymru. What's your story? What do you do? And politically, what made you active?
That's a whole book in itself in terms of what made me active. But I've been doing this nearly all my life. I'm 30 years old now. I studied philosophy, politics, and international relations at university. I did my master's in conflict, state building, and development. So I've worked in the local context here in Wales, in Cardiff, but also in the international context as well, with my home country of Sudan. Now, what I've been doing is putting both my attentions on Wales and on Sudan, on the world's largest humanitarian crisis that I hate talking about, but everybody needs to know about, because what has happened in Sudan is a blueprint of what could happen to other nations, and quite frankly, what could actually happen to the UK if there's a continuing erosion of civil liberties, if there is going to be a police state. Clearly, Reform wants Trump-style politics here in the UK. Thus, they want ICE-style mechanisms and militias running around here in the UK. Well, we've seen that story in Sudan, actually, many decades ago, and seeing that slow burn of the country. Now, I don't want anything like that to happen to Wales or to the UK at all. And so that's why I'm so passionate in terms of my humanitarian work and my civic work here in Wales. But I have four main principles that I hold when it comes to the Sudan work and the UK work, which brings it all together. And it's very simple. I will support those that feed the people. I will support those that clothe the people. I will support those that will educate the people. I will support those that heal the people, regardless of nations, of skin color, of wherever we come from. That's the four things that we all need, minus security. That's the four things we all foundation as a basic human foundation that we need. And so by taking these four principles and using them as the crux, as your moral compass in whatever work that you do, you learn lessons from Sudan to be able to implement in the UK. For example, grassroots organizations, the perseverance and the determination to help somebody in a war zone. I have that same energy and I bring it with me into a casework or a client that I see here in Cardiff. And that improves competence, that improves delivery, and that's what makes people's lives better. And I would be a hypocrite if I were not helping both sides and learning and doing knowledge exchange on both sides. For what happens to you in your side of the world will affect me today or tomorrow, some way, somehow. And in this ever globalized world, being a bit more aware of each other's and where we're coming from, I think, I know this is the right way to go, regardless of whatever they say online and such. When there's another person in need, I'm not going to be looking at your skin color. I want to know who you are and see how we can sit down together and how I can help you. And perhaps one day you can help me too.
That was Elbashir Idris, a Plaid Cymru activist in Wales, in Cardiff. James, what did you make of that Arron Banks tweet quickly? Because I think some people say he's sort of clueless, he doesn't know what he's doing. It does feel like it could just be an advert for Plaid Cymru, but at the same time, he's not clueless, actually. He's been on the winning end of many political campaigns.
Yeah, but I think the attitude to take to that is that it's a joke that's not a joke, right? Like, it has that air of kind of plausible deniability. It's the way of airing a question without actually having to stand behind it. And this is a common feature of that particular brand of sort of populist right or sort of ethno-nationalist discourse, is to float something in a sort of comic or disclaimable way that this is a joke or I'm trolling, while also having like quite a serious intent behind it. To my mind, the important response to that, or the way to respond to that, is to say, actually, returning to kind of ethnic qualifiers of identity is not a route that we're going to go down in this country. It's not something that can be acceptable to us. And it's got to be met with the simple question that Arron Banks should have to answer is not like, ha, 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 I thought you have, whatever slogan you have about Wales, is, do you think a black person can be Welsh? Like, and don't give me some sort of nonsense answer about, well, do you think an English person can be Japanese? Like, I'm interested in your in the answer to this question. Do you believe a black person can be English, can be Welsh? Like, that is a question that these people have to be made to answer, because I think we know what their answer actually is, and it's no.
And again, I said this in the interview, right? Ryan Giggs' dad was black. Second most, I think, give Gareth Bale his flowers. Second most important footballer in Welsh history, Shirley Bassey.
Yeah.
Welsh football captain, Welsh rugby captain, Colin Jackson in '96. I thought these were settled, right? Seemingly not. And again, like you say, even if Arron Banks doesn't think that somebody is Welsh, if their kid is born there and the mother or the father is white Welsh, are they Welsh? That mixed heritage person? Again, when does this happen? What's the magic here, Arron? He did do very well when he ran for West of England mayor in was it 2024?
Yeah.
He did do very well, so he's not daft. And it does feel maybe it's a bit of a pincer movement, right? Nigel is the palatable guy. I'll be the outrider and say crazy shit, racist shit. Yet another legal case around Yvette Cooper's ban of direct action group Palestine Action has begun today. 5 judges, led by Lady Chief Justice Baroness Carr, are now considering the government's appeal, brought by Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, against the High Court's decision that the ban of the group was unlawful. The appeal hearing is set to last 2 days, but a decision likely won't be issued for several weeks. In February, Palestine Action co-founder Huda Amori won her judicial review against the government's prescription of the group, with the High Court ruling that then Home Secretary Yvette Cooper had not acted lawfully in banning Palestine Action. This was based on 2 grounds. First, that prescription of the group was a, quote, very significant interference with the right to freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. And second, was that Cooper had breached her own policy on prescription, using criteria in the Palestine Action case that weren't consistent with the policy. However, rather than quashing the ban after ruling it unlawful, the High Court kept it in place while current Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood pursued the appeal. And that brings us to now. Of course, the ban has had a huge impact on the lives of thousands of people. Since the ban came into place in July last year, over 3,300 individuals have been arrested under the terror law. Why? For holding signs declaring, quote, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action. Under the Terrorism Act, the second of those sentences is illegal to express publicly. Doing so could result in a terrorism conviction and potentially a lengthy custodial sentence. It has been a complete farce, a total joke. And the joke continued in the courtroom today. A letter signed by 1,700 people, including Greta Thunberg, Sally Rooney, and Brian Eno, was handed into the chief judge in court today. And Lady Carr brought that letter up in court.
A typed letter was delivered to the court just before the short adjournment, addressed to me. I have shared it with the Constitution, and I just need briefly to tell you what it says and where we're going from here. It's typed, as I say, and it's addressed to me at the Court of Appeal. It says at the heading, "We oppose genocide, we support Palestine action." There is then a typed list of signatories, which we haven't gone through in any detail, hundreds of names.
James, we've seen people being questioned by the police for having plasticine action on T-shirts. There is nothing wrong with me saying I support Palestine, comma, action is needed. But if we just move the comma one word over, it all changes and I could find myself at His Majesty's pleasure. What do you think is going to happen with regards to this appeal? And even if it stays, it doesn't feel like Starmer and the government are that serious about civil liberties. They're now talking about prescribing the IRGC, which, I have no idea what that even looks like. They haven't learned their lesson from Palestine Action, evidently.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel, this is a serious subject, but I feel pleasantly vindicated because in a conversation I was having prior to the election of this government, I said, well, look, I think you can look at the record of these people and say, if you're a jobbing lawyer or you're a young lawyer looking on what to specialize in, then actually civil liberties, freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of political assembly are going to be really, really pressured under this government because they are instinctively authoritarian and they instinctively believe that people should conform to how they desire them to behave. It's a classic Labour Party vice, is a sense that conformism is a virtue of some kind, right? That thinking the right way and agreeing with them is the virtuous thing to do, and that should be enforced. So I'm not completely surprised that they've chosen to enforce action on kind of politically inconvenient speech, and they've speech of a kind that they find politically threatening. Again, this is a case that is quite narrow in its confines, right? The court hasn't taken a very clear position on, and doesn't take a position on whether the judgment about terror is entirely justified. And it's not really within the court's competence. I suppose what I would say is that the fundamental question for me is about laws of this kind, and those of us who remember the post 9/11 state, in which restrictions of this kind were proposed very widely, that they were believed to be essential. And many of us were concerned at the time and warned that there would be mission creep here, because you give the state a tool like this, which it can use to quash protest and assembly, and it will eventually end up using it. Now, in the case of police officers, and these are often officers who are unclear about the application of the law and who just have a sort of, nick them all and let the courts sort them out, or let the CPS sort out who they want to prosecute. It's unsurprising that if police are given discretionary powers, they will use them in a pretty heavy-handed way. We know that to be the case. That is a consistent feature of policing in this country. And the last thing to say here, and a really important thing to say, is that there is a number of people who have been prosecuted under, in course of prosecution under these offences, have been put on remand, essentially jailed for the period while they're waiting for their court case to happen. These are people who, the Filton 24 is, of course, the moniker that's used to group these, a young group of Palestine Action protesters here. These are people who in my view, very unjustly, have been ruled, have been effectively imprisoned while waiting for a trial that the court system being what it is, has been a long way away. Now they're out at the moment, but that could change very, very rapidly, depending on how this case goes. This, incidentally, is a pretty wide feature of arrests that are made for political crimes of one kind or another. So often protest offences. People can often find themselves waiting either on remand, but more often in effectively employment limbo. So they can't get on with their lives, they can't live their lives, they can't effectively move on while they're waiting for what can often be a process that takes many, many years to settle. Often ending with a huge settlement against the state or against the police in one way or another.
Just crazy, right? Just crazy. I can go and fight. Well, I can't. I wouldn't want to. You can go and fight for the IDF. You can undertake all kinds of things, and you don't seem to have any consequence. You can come back to the UK, and these people do exist, by the way, in actually quite surprising numbers, but you can't just utter a sentence. It's quite remarkable. It really is quite remarkable. And it's something I think that any progressive government in the future should be looking into in terms of enshrining the right to free speech and freedom of association. James, great show.
My pleasure to be here.
We need to get you back on.
I'm always happy to come in.
I'm going to hold you to that. A rather humorous grammar pedant said that it shouldn't be a colon after I support Palestine. It should be a semicolon. It shouldn't be a comma, rather. It should be a semicolon. Well spotted. We have smarter viewers than I, as well as, the LRB. They don't have a monopoly on the smart people. We have them watching Novara Media too. And of course, to all of you watching, thanks for tuning in tonight. Come back tomorrow for another show from 6 p.m. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.